this time, we are going to adjourn into our community facilities districts. With that, we need a motion.
We're calling it to order. And all we're doing is calling it to order. We're doing a silent roll call. Your roll call has been taken, and it will reflect the same as the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Calling to order district number 1. Roll call is reflected. Calling to order district number 2.
A roll call is reflected.
It is reflected. At this time, we need a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn to a joint executive session with Merrill Ranch Community Facilities District Number 1 and Merrill Ranch Community Facilities District Number 2 and the mayor and council of the town of Florence.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We're going into adjournment. Okay, at this time, can we have a motion to adjourn from Merrill Ranch Community Facilities District Number 1 executive session?
I make a motion we adjourn from Merrill Ranch Community Facility District Number 1 executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Councilmember Hughes. May we have a motion to adjourn from Merrill Ranch Community Facilities District Number 1 meeting?
I make a motion that we adjourn from the Merrill Ranch Community Facility District Number 1 meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Motion to adjourn from Merrill Ranch Community Facilities District Number 2 executive session.
Make a motion that we adjourn from the Merrill Ranch Community Facility District Number 2 executive session.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Need a motion to adjourn from Merrill Ranch Community Facilities District Number 2 meeting?
Make a motion to adjourn from the Merrill Ranch Community Facilities District Number 2 meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Need a motion to adjourn from the Florence Town Council executive session and resume to regular meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn from the Florence Town Council executive session and to resume regular meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same side. Motion carries. That brings us up to item number 11, which is our moment of silence. We have some additional members in our audience at this time. We are dedicating this moment of silence to Councilmember Bill Hawkins. Councilmember Bill Hawkins devoted his life to Florence, caring deeply about the town and our citizens. At this time, we'll go ahead to item number 13. This is our call to the public. Call to the public for public comment on issues within the jurisdiction of the town council. Council rules limit public comment to 3 minutes. Individual council members may respond to criticism made by those commenting, may ask staff to review a matter raised, or may ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. However, members of the council shall not discuss or take action on any matter during an open call to the public unless those matters are posted for discussion and legal action. Is there anybody this evening that would like to speak at call to the public? At this time, we'll go ahead and close call to the public, which brings us to item number 14, public hearing and presentation. Item number A is a public hearing to receive public comment on a text amendment to the Town of Florence Land Development Code and the first reading of Ordinance 68920. This is an ordinance of the Town of Florence, Pinal County, Arizona, amending the Town of Florence Code of Ordinances, Title 15 Land Usage, Chapter 150 Development Code, Administration and Procedures, Sections 150 to 150-19, and adding Sections 150-20 to 150-24, and relocating Part 1 General Provisions, Sections 150-80 to 150-81 to the Administration and Procedures Sections 150-20 to 150-21, respectively. The proposed text amendment document was declared a public record by Resolution Number 173320. One paper copy is on file in the office of the town clerk, and one electronic copy is available on the Town of Florence website. At this time, we have with us Mr. Dana Burkhart. How are you this evening, Mr. Burkhart?
Wonderful, Mayor. Thank you very much for holding this item discussion and public hearing this evening. And as you mentioned, this is a two-part agenda item. First of all, first reading of the council's two readings that will ultimately occur. Second is going to be scheduled for April 6th for this proposed text amendment. And then most importantly and secondly, this evening you also hold a public hearing on this proposed text amendment. And I'd suggest after quick presentation, Q&A by council, maybe open up the public hearing at that time, unless you have a different protocol.
No, that is exactly as follows.
Excellent. Mayor, council members, why are we proposing to amend the procedures and administration text in the development code of the city, of the town? Apologize. Well, first of all, we want to correct code discrepancies and conflicts that exist. Over the years, the development code's been updated and insertions have been made or deletions have been made. Processes have changed within the community development department, as well as names of positions in the department. So that's one area that I'll explore a little bit quickly with you in a moment. Also, reason why to change is to address some statutory changes that have occurred over the years that are not reflected in your current development code in the procedures section. It's really important to understand staff's intent to not make any regulatory changes or move any goalposts of any property owners through this process. It's simply to clarify, clean up. The development code is an economic development tool of the town. When some residents or businesses are looking to make changes, or somebody's looking to make an investment in the community, if they're going to look at the development code to see what that use, the use that they intend to bring to the community, or subdivision, or what have it. So having an easy, well-organized document, development code, to navigate quickly to the areas that would impact them is important. So for those reasons, that's why we're making these updates. I'll quickly dive into the scope, again, to correct some discrepancies. One of the major, I guess, confusions that occurred in the procedures and administration section was a redundant design review process. I think at one time there is also currently in your code a site plan review process, but to my knowledge, it doesn't really have any finality or specific requirements. So we've simply integrated that with the design review process that the town does practice regularly. So that's a big cleanup and simplification of that portion of the code. We also need to codify the pre-application conference meetings that the community development department likes to have before somebody makes an application. We want to, sit down and talk with them before they have to put any money out to the city for applications or anything like that, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Very important process that most all communities exercise as well. The current development code explains in certain sections under certain uses that there's a temporary use permit required. Well, the current development code does not have a temporary use permit procedure, so we've inserted this language. And then again, to update terminology to be consistent, I think most notably the name of the department went from planning department to community development, and as well as some of the positions in the department were renamed. And those updates are reflected in this proposed text amendment. Secondly, the scope is also intended to update and reflect changes in statute. HB 2016 passed back in 2017 regarding how people that want to appeal an abutting rezoning occur and how they're calculated. I can dive into the weeds on that if you wish. And then secondly, if you might recall back in 2006, state legislature, or I'm sorry, Proposition 207 was passed, giving private property rights to, expanding the private property rights of owners and allow them to sue cities. So there's another procedure that we inserted into the language of this text amendment to give the city an additional opportunity to hear any potential future claims, should that ever happen, and in a way to help put the city or the town in a better situation there. Then finally, again, no regulatory changes. We know currently you're in the process of updating your decennial general plan, a number of different, I think your transportation master plan, redevelopment plan, parks and open space master plans are all in process. And those plans are what the development code is intended to implement or help be the most useful tool to implement. So after you get through those updates and those visioning and long-range planning policies, it'd be important then to go back and revisit the entire development code and say, okay, what in this code isn't helping implement that, or how can we tweak the development code? And those will be more of your regulatory changes. The goalposts might move a little bit for certain situations. So again, that's what we are avoiding in this text amendment. Finally, we started this review process back in May of 2019. A few changes and a little slowdown on occasion over the past year. But we've held a total of 10 public meetings. We've also held a community meeting prior to a planning and zoning commission. And at that same time, we have also, or all along, we've advertised this text on the community development webpage, as well as a link to submit comments, should anybody wish to submit comments. The Historic District Advisory Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission both recommend council approves this agenda item after the second read. So with that, Mayor, council members, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council members, do you have any questions? This has been a lengthy process. We appreciate your clear communication throughout the process, as well as the opportunities for public input. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing portion of this. Is there anybody from the public that has anything that they would like to say at this time regarding this item? With that, we're going to go ahead and close that public comment time frame. This will next appear on April 6th, 2020. Thank you. Item number B is our Census 2020 presentation. Ms. Jennifer Evans.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'd like to give you a brief presentation on the U.S. Census that was recently started. Many of you may know that the U.S. Constitution requires that a decennial census be conducted every 10 years. And that's been going on since 1790. Well, it's 2020 and time to do it again. And just last week on March 12th, the U.S. Census Bureau released or sent out invitations to participate in the census. Now, there's 3 ways to respond. Many people, especially those that receive mail at their homes, should have received an invitation that asks people to go online, and they are provided a code to respond to the census online. You can also call and participate, or you can participate via mail. And some of our residents here in Florence will receive a mail-in questionnaire because they do not receive their mail at their homes. There's 3 other ways that the Census Bureau is providing for people to participate. We've partnered with our library to provide a questionnaire assistance center there. Someone who does not have a computer can go to the library and complete the census. We also have event-based questionnaire assistance where Census Bureau personnel will come to a special event and have a tablet available for people to participate there. And then as we start getting responses to the census, there is a website that we can go to and see the response rate, and that's going to be updated daily. So once these responses start coming in, we can see where we need to provide more resources to get people to participate. Our census schedule is, as I mentioned earlier, invitations were mailed out March 12th. You should get them, if you haven't already, within the week. And then beginning March 16th, you'll receive reminders if you have not participated. Now, this will go on until mid-May, when the Census Bureau will send enumerators around to residents that have not participated. And then the conclusion of the census will be in July 31. Now, I say all of this, things can change given our situation today, especially with the questionnaire assistance and that sort of thing. So I think some of these deadlines might move out a little bit. So we're asking everyone to help us to get the most participation in the census. We encourage people to respond online, and via phone is the most economical way to do it and the quickest. I know I completed my household's questionnaire over the weekend, and it took me 6 minutes. So you can't beat that. We want to remind people to cooperate with census takers if they come to your house, and also to emphasize that the census is safe and secure. Everyone's responses are kept confidential for 72 years. So we can rely on that security. And then we are focusing our local efforts on hard-to-count populations. Those can be small children, they can be immigrants or farm workers, non-English speakers, that sort of thing. And lastly, I just wanted to mention the response rate challenge. I'd like to challenge our community to increase our response rate this year. Last year, or the last census, the census tract that covers this particular area had, well, I think it was a 60% response rate. We'd really like to see those response rates around 90%. One of our other census tracts, which starts at Butte and goes south, that was another low response area. So we just want to get the word out and encourage everyone to respond as quickly as possible. And with that, that's all I have.
Well, thank you so much. Do you know if 10 years ago they had all of the options available in regards to the many platforms of how to respond?
They did not, Madam Mayor. This is the first time that we're going to have the online option. And I don't believe they had the phone option either.
I think those two options will increase, because when you give people opportunity to participate, especially from home without communicating with others,
that's right,
face to face, they tend to do better, as shown in our mail-in ballots.
All right, thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you for the presentation. Item number 15 is our consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda will be handled by a single vote as part of the consent agenda, unless a council member or a member of the public objects at the time the agenda item is called. Item A is authorization to dispose of vehicles that are no longer needed or have outlived their useful life. Item B is approval of Lantis Fireworks and Lasers contract for the 2020-2021 fireworks display in the amount not to exceed $37,000. Item C is approval of a change order for the Post and Butte Preserve Project, on-call engineering, pursuant to council-approved contract with Lest Land Resources for an additional $2,500, increasing the total to $199,913, which is within budget for this fiscal year. Item D is to authorize town staff to proceed with negotiations with the 5 parks communities in drafting a special use agreement for future development of a town parcel for use as a community dog park. Item E is approval of the January 27th, 2020 Town Council meeting minutes. Item F is to receive and file the following board and commission minutes. 1, January 9th, 2020, Arts and Culture Commission meeting minutes. 2, January 29th, 2020, Historic District Advisory Commission meeting minutes. And 3, December 5th, 2019, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, that is your consent agenda. Is there anybody in the public or on council that would like any item removed? With that, we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item 16, unfinished business. Item A is ordinance number 69120. This is the second reading and discussion, approval, disapproval of an ordinance of the Town of Florence, Pinal County, Arizona, amending sections of Chapter 32-1, Town Boards, Commission, and Committees. Ms. Lisa Garcia.
Mayor and members of council, as you recall, this is a housekeeping item. This does correct our town code to be consistent with the ordinance that was adopted at the last meeting.
Thank you very much. Any member of council have any questions? With that, we need a motion.
Make a motion to approve ordinance number 691-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 17 is new business. The first item, item A, is for discussion, approval, disapproval, to adopt the major general plan amendment calendar for 2020. Mr. Larry Harmer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is basically a pretty simple item. By state statute, each year a community is allowed to have one calendared process to do a major amendment to the general plan. Now, we know we're doing a major update to the overall plan. However, that is not expected to be completed until into next calendar year. There has not been any real activity in this regard the last few years, but recently we have been approached with the potential of processing a general plan amendment on some properties north of the Gila. So therefore, we've set a calendar and are put in front of you tonight for your approval as per state statute. One of the things I did want to point out just very quickly, if you notice between the end of the application submittal deadline and the Planning and Zoning Commission first public hearing, there's a large gap. That's because we need to, once we receive the application, we review it, and then we package it, and it is sent to about 12.5 agencies and communities so that they have the opportunity to review it and make any comments also before going to public hearing. And that includes APS, SRP, all the way to the town of Queen Creek, Coolidge, and neighboring communities. So there's that time period just for their review is 60 days by statute. So we have to have enough lead time to packages to get to them, and then once we receive any comments, if we do, then to process those and package them, do the advertising for a public hearing.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions? All right.
Yes, I have a question. Excuse me. Yes, I have a question. As far as the timing, everybody gets a lot of time, it looks like, to approve this except the town council.
This is not cast in stone. The deadline is cast in stone once we set it. And from that point out, it's all tentative in order to do a fairly expedited schedule. But by the time it makes it to the town council, you will have an extensive staff report. And if it's comprehensive, too comprehensive or too complicated, we will do a work session. This only advertises public hearings.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Good.
All right. If there's no further questions, with that, we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the major general plan amendment calendar for 2020.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed,
Aye.
same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item B is the first reading of ordinance number 69220. This is an ordinance of the Town of Florence, Pinal County, Arizona, amending the Code of Ordinance, Arizona, Title 11, Business Regulations by amending Chapter 111, Section 111.5, Operational Requirements. Ms. Lisa Garcia.
Mayor and members of council, you'll recall that in 2018, the state passed a mobile food truck ordinance, and the League of Arizona Cities and Towns did a model city code for each one of us to adopt. In that time, there was a section where we were allowed to go in and have the feet separation from residential use be 250 feet. As the maps I've shown you in your Exhibit A and your Exhibit B, what actually happened was the town of Florence made it to where mobile food trucks really couldn't be on the street. The way that Main Street is set up and other areas, 2 streets back, there are housing residential use, and that was not the intention of the town of Florence. It was not the intention to eliminate food trucks from being able to operate. As you know, we use food trucks in our special events. We also have food trucks at Third Friday and at other events, and the state law does allow them to park in any public parking space. After it was brought to our attention that the map was incorrect, we went back in and said, okay, and worked with our GIS to be able to go in and say what would be an appropriate footage away from residential use. And what we're doing is we're recommending 50 feet from residential use, or if a mobile food truck does not produce less or produce more than 66 decibel, it can be within that 50 feet. That would mean somebody who's using solar or someone that does not need to use a generator. If you're still using a generator and creating more than 66 decibels, then you would be outside of the 200 feet, or outside the 50 feet. I'm sorry. And the next one is a resolution that goes in, and it states that the town of Florence will not enforce the code as it's written until the adoption and the effectiveness of ordinance number 692-20, and that is within your legislative powers to do that.
All right. I am very glad to see us making it easier and more friendly legally, even though we've always been friendly and allowing it. It's just, it was brought to our attention and we can move forward. Are there any questions? Councilmember Wall.
Throughout this CAF and the next one, item C, under H1, I wasn't clear on what that would say if in fact we adopt this.
It would say, a residential area, a mobile food vendor shall not operate in an area zoned for residential use or within 50 feet of the area zone for residential use. Use to use, not property line to property line, except, and then it would go in and A, B, and C would be included.
What does use to use mean?
That would mean, Cliff, you explain that since that's your wording.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council member, sometimes when you have these separation requirements and zoning regulations, there becomes an issue of where you measure from point A to point B. So instead of, for example, measuring from the property line to another property line, so from the use on this property to the residential use on the other property. So it's meant to be more flexible in this situation.
I think. Thank you.
All right, if there are no further questions, with that we need a motion. Actually, Councilmember Hughes, do you have any questions?
No.
Item B would be a first reading only. Item C would take action.
Correct. So moving on to item C, which is the resolution 173520. This is the item for discussion, approval, disapproval of a resolution of the town of Florence, Pinal County, Arizona, exercising town council's legislative discretion to not enforce or suspend enforcement of Chapter 111, Section 111.5 until the effective date of ordinance number 69220, as Ms. Lisa Garcia just presented to council. With that, we need a motion.
Make a motion to approve Resolution 1735-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed, same sign. And that motion carries. Item number D is resolution number 173620. This is discussion, approval, disapproval of a resolution of the Town of Florence, Pinal County, Arizona, adopting revisions to the Town of Florence property lease policy. Ms. Lisa Garcia.
Mayor and members of council, staff did take your direction, go back in and re-look at both the policy, the RFQ, or RFP, and the lease that we actually use. Not only did we go through it, we also took it to our policy committee, met with our town attorney, and Ms. Evans did send it out to the property owners so that they could also view it. We do have some questions still tonight we need to answer. On page 4 of the memorandum, where it talks about examples and lease rates, that's one thing that I do want to bring up right away because I want to make sure that we do not forget that. What we went in and said was that we had help from Miss Cindy Seals, who was able to give us a letter stating what the commercial rates are downtown. We were also able to go in, and staff was able to go in and talk to business owners and also confirm those rates. We're bringing back to you those rates and letting you know that council has a decision to make, either that we can go in and charge 0.51 cent per square foot, or council has the right underneath the statutes to go back in and say that you want to charge less than market rate because of the GIPLET, and be able to add that into a combined rate to 4.51 per square foot. But we are recommending that we do a consumer price index each year, and so there would be a factor in it that the rates would increase each year if the consumer price index did increase. And then I'd like to go over the rest of it, but we'll come back to that as well. So in the lease, we did go through and we did make modifications and remove anything for the common areas. There is no utilities charged within the lease as requested by council. We did go in and streamline the process and try to make it a much more user-friendly process with general language so that anybody who was renting the building could rent. We did, as you suggested, and took out any language that would be for the area to be used as an incubator, since it's not. We are just a person who leases property, so we're a landlord basically, and we took it down to be that type of lease. We talked about the rates, which we're going to come back to. And we went ahead and we defined the RFP process. Under state law, we're required to let an RFP for 30 days. And we're going to have 2 spaces that are going to be available. As you know, Public Works is working on 1 suite with egress issues. And we did have a tenant give the notice, and they will no longer be in the space as of April 30th. So we would very much like to get the RFPs on the street. Underneath the new process, council would come back to council for use. The lease that you have before you would then be negotiated by the town manager and signed off by the town manager. Streamline the process, makes it easier. After council goes ahead and says yes, they would like to proceed with a specific use, that would start the appeal process. And after the manager waited for that time period, he would be eligible to enter into a lease with the person that was elected by the council.
Thank you very much. Council, what are your questions? Councilmember Wall.
I apologize. I have red marks all over this.
Well, that's great.
And
Let's talk about it.
It's probably my own confusion, but maybe you can help me. Primarily starting with the charts on page 3, the first table where the current monthly rents are listed for 4 spaces, I'm assuming that 1, 2, and 3 are suites 101, 102, and 202. Is suite 4 201.
Suite 4 is the Brunnen building.
So,
It's number 1, 2, and 3. Those are the properties that are currently being leased. Right now, the lease shows that it's 891 square feet, but that's actually going to change to 1,782. That is the upstairs, downstairs.
okay, that wasn't real clear, because if you look at the listing above that, items 1 through 5 are a little different.
Yeah, Brunnen shows 1,782. We use the 891 because that's what it is currently leased at.
Understood.
And then right to the side, it's corrected with the 1,782.
Okay, so my next question is, are these the proposed rates when those spaces are vacant?
These are the proposed, so right now,
The leases need to be renewed.
and this would be the 0.51 cents would be the new market rate.
Okay,
And so that would be what the staff would be proposing, be the market rate. Then we would come back to you and say, we do understand that people pay the GIPLET tax, so we offered you a scenario of a nonprofit. In scenario 1, rent would still be 51 cents per square foot. If the council did a combined rate for a nonprofit, and that's including GIPLET and the rate to equal 51 cents, a nonprofit would still pay 51 cents because the combined rate, they don't pay GIPLET, so it would be a lesser rate. It would not be a lesser rate. They would pay 51 cents market rate.
okay, so now Suite 101 is becoming a for-profit business, is that correct?
At this, yes, the Fudge Shop is becoming a for-profit business. It was sold, so they will pay
Okay,
GIPLET. We will have both suites upstairs vacant. And
Okay.
until council selects a use, we do not know what that will be.
okay. And the use would be selected from an RFP response?
We would go out to the street for 30 days. Staff would place higher and best use per your policies. We would bring them back, council would select.
Okay, got it. Last but maybe not least, the common area utilities. Why is the phone charge so high compared to the electrical charge?
The phone charge includes both the alarm and the sprinkler system. So that's your security system, and it's 4 lines.
Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
And then is the AC and the electrical in the common area on a separate meter from the other areas?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the water usage for? Is there a public restroom in the common area?
There is a public restroom in the common areas.
Okay. Okay.
That would be the restroom that's in the hallway.
Okay. And Brunnen does pay a GIPLET?
Brunnen does.
Okay. Okay. Sorry to take so much of the time.
It's a very confusing, and it's the first time council is really given the opportunity to decide how they want to structure their rates. So we very much want you to ask questions. We want to answer the questions, and we want to make sure that we're doing what it is you want us to do when we're leasing our buildings.
Thank you.
Are there any other council members? Councilmember Cortez.
Yeah, so the first thing is we have it listed as a modified gross lease. And if
What page are you on?
Oh, I'm just right here on the back of the agenda item.
Okay.
Sorry. General lease rental rates 1A. Property shall be rented on a modified gross lease basis. So gross lease means that all rates are included in a one lump sum. So if we charge them $1,500 a month, that includes their taxes, utilities, insurance, everything, and that is not how our leases are. Our tenants pay separate.
What would you suggest I put in there? I will defer to you.
Well, I don't have my notes with me, sorry.
Triple net.
A modified, it's, I was trying to pull it up. I had notes on this, and I
It's called
apologize.
the triple net.
Did you say triple met, Judy?
Net,
Net.
Net.
but it should be a
NET.
modified one.
We can change it to modified triple net. We'd be happy to.
Yes, because and my concern is because I don't want somebody to say, well, I pay a gross lease, and so I shouldn't be paying separate my taxes, my insurance, and my utilities, because those are separate charges. They pay their lease amount of whatever it is, 24 cents a square foot, then they pay an additional amount for their utilities, and they pay an additional amount for their GIPLET or taxes. So when you say that it's a gross lease, it could be confusing to somebody,
Yeah.
because you would expect it to be, when I hear gross lease, I expect everything to be lumped into one sum. I also I'm not big on having them pay the phone line fee, because that's going to be there regardless if a tenant is there or not.
That's what we pay. That's showing what we pay.
Okay. And then,
Council asked that at the last staff meeting, so we just wanted to bring back those, but we're not suggesting that the tenants pay.
and then my other one, I'll just wait till we talk about the actual lease rate.
Bring it up now.
Oh, okay, well, I'll bring it up now then. So, I guess I'll state my opinion. I think that the GIPLET should be considered part of their lease rate. So if they're paying 24 cents now, I don't want to raise them to 51 cents plus then add the GIPLET to it, because then I think that pushes us higher than what our market can handle. And we can't compare ourselves to some of the other markets around us that normally maybe we would be able to, because they're experiencing a different type of economic situation right now than what we are. So I would prefer to have ours combined to total what the going rate is. But in that, I would also like to see us in the summertime months offer some type of relief for our tenants, so that they can, because it's hard we're seasonal. Even though we don't want to be, right now we're still seasonal until we can build up our Main Street and our downtown and our other businesses. We're seasonal. So when you look at other seasonal areas, they give them a discounted rate during those off months to kind of compensate. So either we give them a discounted rate with like an agreement that they would be still open the 32 hours or whatever their lease says they need to be open per week, or we say, okay, if you choose to close, then that was your choice, but you still got to pay the rent. I would just like for us to give them something in the summertime to help them make it through the summer, because that's the hardest time. And they're fighting hard to get customers down here, but I mean, they can only do so much. But if we could get them I don't want to say cheaper, but a reasonable rate in the summertime, it would encourage them to stay open during the summertime and not want to close or not want to adjust their hours drastically, because we need those businesses open year-round to help build up our summer traffic.
Do you have a suggestion as to what kind of discount we would include in the lease?
My thought was like 30%. I don't know if discount is the right term. I don't want to get stuck on that term, because I don't know if that would be the right term, but I would like to see like a 30% decrease in rent in the summertime to help our tenants make it through the summer.
What months do you consider
Madam Mayor?
summertime?
I think when I calculate it, it'd be like four months. It would only be like 4 months out of the year that they would get that discounted rate.
Okay, thank you.
May to August?
Yeah, because the snowbirds typically leave sometime between March and April. It just kind of depends on the heat. But I think if we could set it for, it's always going to be, like you said, May to August, because they're usually coming back September, October, I think that would be fair.
We can definitely write that in. We can write that in and bring it back to council and let you have another view of the agreement if you'd like.
And then we could see what that rate would kind of come out to be during those months, so that way we would know what 30% actually calculates to.
What we can do is, is everybody in agreement with scenario 2 then? Scenario 2 would be the town council could advise the town manager to use a combined rate to equal 51 cents per square foot. This would be deduct the GIPLET rate from the amount the town receives.
Yes.
Tenant would still be required to pay it, the GIPLET rate to the county.
Yes.
Okay. Then what we will do is we will go with that rate, and we will bring you back, and we will develop a summer program for anyone who would remain open, where they're 32 hours a week, and we would, the person who chooses to close the business would not receive that summer rate. That's to help the businesses stay open.
Oh.
So we do understand what you're asking for.
Well,
But how are we going to mandate that, or how are we, I mean, there's some people, you know, I feel like sometimes you can micromanage that stuff, and I don't want that to be the situation where we're having to sit there and count hours of how many people are closing, and so I feel like that can get really tricky. I'd like us to find a more sensible way to be able to have a driver for them, an incentive for them to want to do it. I agree that they should maybe get a little bit of a break in the summer, but I'd like to find a way that, you know, serves the community well, but that where we're not having to overstep, where we're having to micromanage the entire building consistently. So I don't know what that necessarily would look like.
As their,
open to ideas.
As their landlord, we would typically, whenever you're in a setting like this in the commercial world, and you're in a building like that, like what we have, or a strip mall or a regular mall or whatever, you're typically required to notify your landlord anytime you're going to be closed outside of emergencies. So if you know that every year, July 1 through July 10, you're going to close because you're going on vacation, you should already be notifying your landlord of that. So I don't think like a normal vacation would count. Sure, you need to go on vacation, and we know that that's going to happen in the summertime, because during season you can't take a vacation. But during the summer you would. So if you're going to be gone for a week or 2 weeks, I don't think any of us would have a problem. It's if you're going to close May 1st and you're not going to open back up till August. You're hurting the other businesses that are downtown, because your business might be the one business that maybe brings the most people down there. So we need to encourage and get the businesses that are in our buildings to at least commit to being open, because if you were in any other type of mall setting or strip mall or building like that, you would be required to give your landlord notice. And a lot of times in those type of buildings, if you open late, you're fined. So we're pretty lenient on that factor.
Wasn't that already in our contracts, Lisa, that they had to stay open a certain number of hours? Remind me.
It is.
Okay, so it's already mandated that they have to stay open, and or else let us know if they're going to be closed.
We've had hardships where people have had to close, but it is in our current.
Of course, that's to be expected. Okay.
This would just be if they closed in the summertime for more than just like a vacation, then they wouldn't get that discounted rate.
But aren't they, but she's saying that they're already mandated to stay open, is what I'm understanding. So I'd love if we have more incentive. I agree about the discount. I'd like to find an incentive that serves the community well, that isn't something that we're already covering. And I don't know what that is, but I agree that, you know, it'd be nice to offer them an incentive to help the community.
So I do have one ask for tonight. We will go back in and we will rework this. But since we have a resolution on the floor, Cliff, is it okay if we convert this resolution to a motion to authorize staff to proceed with the RFP? As you know, we have 30 days to get, to list the publication, to let people know we have the 2 spaces available. We would like to be able to proceed with filling those 2 spaces. And as you can see from the timeline, even if we go through, the motions could not come back to council until May 19th, and we will have the space available at the end of April. So we would like to proceed with trying to find people that would like to be in the building.
That's a good ask. That's forward thinking.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to make a comment with regard to a discount or a reduction in rental rate during the summer months. If we look at a 51 cents per square foot rate, including the gyplet, and we subtract the gyplet, which is not going to be, it looks like 19 cents for a couple of the suites, we're talking about a 32 cent per square foot rate. And if we take 30% of that, we're subtracting between 9 and 10 cents per square foot, which would bring us down to 23 to 24 cents per square foot during the summer months. Just want to make sure that everyone's aware of what that would result in.
And to me, I'm not stuck on the 30%. To me, that's almost too high. I think that if we have some type of incentive, great. Maybe it's a certain dollar amount. It's not a percentage, because the square footage is make that vary too much. But I agree with the idea of having an incentive, something that's community-based, something that serves our citizens, but explore what those dollar amounts actually look like in tangible dollars.
Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, Ms. Councilmember Hughes, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, is the ingress problem fixed now?
It'll be fixed by June 30th is what we are told by staff. So we're going to try to go out for both businesses to be able to be filled, and hopefully on the May 19th date, we will be bringing you with 2 uses.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, with that, we need a motion for staff to proceed with issuance of the RFP, as well as to bring back some different options regarding the leases with reprievement during the summer months.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? And that motion carries. Item number 18 is a work session on the streetlight improvement ordinance and policy. Mr. Chris Salas.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'd like to start off by saying that not everything necessarily in the presentation, some of the stuff was in the RCA, and so some items may move back and forth a little bit. So the first thing I wanted to do was offer a definition for the actual SLID. A streetlight improvement district is a neighborhood partnership and very common practice in which property owners in a defined area agree to pay cost to operate and maintain their immediate area street lights through a property tax. Some of these things will become important a little bit later on. I wanted to kind of just briefly summarize what other communities are doing. Surprise, Apache Junction, Maricopa County, City of Scottsdale, Buckeye, Queen Creek, Show Low, Litchfield Park, Gilbert, Peoria, all have slids. And I probably could have went further, but these are, again, some of the comparators that I found briefly. Also important, as part of my research, one of the things that was brought up and that I promised to do, there's not a specific slide on it, is I did reach out to significant other communities on how they were paying their streetlights, and in areas that weren't necessarily under a SLID umbrella, if you will. So several of them that did have areas where there was no SLIDs, they commingled the use of HERF and the general fund. Sometimes it was mainly the general fund, sometimes it was 100% HERF. And the one thing that was brought up, it was easy for me to understand, but I want to give it context. The one thing that was brought up to me was be very careful about necessarily comparing your community to our community and only looking at one budget line item. I couldn't agree more, but I just asked the question so that I could get kind of a simple answer. Was some of them using general fund, was some of them using HERF, or again, commingling those? But obviously, that's very micro. Like I said, depending on how the budget transfers are occurring and other things, that could mean very little or a lot. But again, it was one of the It's the answer to a question that later on will be discussed in a second. New slids forthcoming. One thing that we wanted to as staff is make sure everyone understands that obviously Anthem will not be the last slid. In fact, we have, I believe, 6 slids in right now for Mesquite Trails. So again, per our current ordinance, each new subdivision is required to form a slid before the final plat is recorded. Mesquite Trails has already submitted their applications, and there are many more to come. So I believe there's approximately 650 lots being shown here for the future slids for just Mesquite Trails. And this is not their entire, this is again essentially what we're being labeled as phase 1. I don't believe there's a official phasing, so I don't want to confuse that, but this is what they're referring to as phase 1, basically in the way that they're looking at their first offering, and it also corresponds to their wastewater solution. So there's several things that tie into phase 1, including the way they developed their TIA. So one of the questions that was asked, and I want to be very careful, the way this slide is written, it is paraphrasing, even though these were taken straight from the minutes. So if that council member finds offense to this, this is the best that the clerk's office could do in taking that right from the actual meeting minutes. That was asked, is there an opportunity to determine how many streetlights could be paid by HER fund in the Anthem area so that the residents will not have to pay for those streetlights? The lights would be the ones in the arterial roadways as well as density lights. And so, as I previously said, again, the state law covering the use of HERF doesn't delineate to this level. Several communities pay the lights, both the lights on the arterial streets as well as the lights interior to the subdivision with the both use of HERF as well as commingling HERF and the general fund. So as it speaks to the legality, HERF could be used for that. I mean, that is the easiest, most simple answer, is that it could be used. So I don't want to dispute that it could be used. Again, as a comprehensive vantage point here, we want to bring up again what's kind of going on with HERF, and this is something that at least for the last 15 to 20 years has been going on within my own community, the engineering, transportation community, transportation planners, is again, specifically in the state of Arizona, that the Arizona gas taxes were last increased in 1991. During that time, cars have become more fuel efficient, reducing the total revenues per mile driven. Tire pressures have increased, causing the roads to see more loads and increase wear to the roads. That's more specifically to semis and truck trailers, but on all vehicles, we've actually seen tire pressures increased. Electric and hybrid vehicles cause similar wear to the roads, but don't contribute nearly as much to the revenue stream to repair the roads. So Public Works Streets Department across the nation, including at the state and federal level, have been asked to do the same with less for a long time. Something that's going on right now is that House Bill 2899 aims to increase gas 6 cents per year over the next 3 years. So that would be a total increase of 24 cents, I believe. And then as well as increased registration fees for electric vehicles. So something else that I wanted to discuss was, again, what my world is again, the quite possible, quite for certain, the prison closing. So these are numbers from Mr. Benjamin Bitter. These are numbers that I believe are his official communication on all levels. So this is an annual loss of HERF of $276,404, as well as a decrease of $164,789 on transportation excise tax. So it'll be a total decrease of $441,193. If that was through some type of de-annexation, if you will, where we were losing responsibilities and we were losing revenue, that might be one thing to kind of have some type of offset. Here, we don't maintain essentially any of the roads interior to that prison, and we will be losing a significant amount of revenue. I think there are a few things before the conclusion that I wanted to bring up here. Do we have any questions so far? Okay.
I just wanted to say, I know that was one of my questions that you're referencing to about how we could pay for those lights. I still don't like the fact that the residents are ultimately responsible for something that I believe should be paid out of the general fund or her funds. That's, you know, that is something that bothers me, but now with the picture changing, especially with the prospective prison closing, I think that now would be irresponsible to look at those HER funds to try to take anything from there, since obviously we're looking at a massive deficit in the future years. So although that's a fight I still think is worth fighting, I just don't feel that the timing's right to pursue something like that personally. There's too many other things that need that money right at this point.
One of the things that was a little bit of an, number one, I appreciate your response to the response by your original question, and that's not for me to judge the philosophy of the council, but I do appreciate you at least responding. And again, these same philosophies, though, will be used for each and every development that moves forward from Mesquite Trails on their arterials adjacent to their community, as well as their interior collectors, what you guys often refer to as the Merrill Ranch Parkway of your subdivision. So Desert Color Parkway, Mesquite Trails, Boulevard, all those ones will be sharing the same philosophy. I just wanted to make sure everyone understood currently what we use HERF and the TET, the Transportation Excise Tax. One, a good percentage of that does to go pay for our streets employees. One of the good things that has happened over the years is that based on all the council approvals for our maintenance projects, so all of the chip seals you see in the downtown, all of the work that we've done so far on some of our projects like the Florence Heights Boulevard, specifically the project that we did north of Franklin Road on Hunt Highway, we have reduced the amount of time spent in our patch trucks significantly. We have reduced the amount of crack sealing that we do significantly. We reduced the amount of materials that we use in the patch truck significantly. So as of right now, we've cut a lot of our operating costs down. So thankfully, that this $441,000 hit through the prisons is not going to be the same thing it would have been 3 or 4 years ago before doing all these improvements. So we've made tremendous strides in reducing those costs. But again, those projects are often not, they are not being funded, generally speaking, out of our development impact fee fund. We don't get a lot of development impact fees. And so it's one of those age-old arguments. Well, if you're not getting a lot of those fees, then you're not having a lot of new residents, so therefore you're not having that differential impact. I would argue that Florence is a little different because Hunt Highway acts like a highway. So a lot of that, you will continue to see the background traffic increase there if we stopped having building permits in Florence altogether. You'd still see a continual increase. So that has been a concern of mine for now the 4 years, is how we're going to find the funds to eventually not just widen Hunt Highway, but to actually continue to maintain the interior lanes. And we discussed that at a council meeting just very recently about the ongoing geotechnical investigation needed, and we're starting that project. But again, that's a planning level effort that could go out multiple years to finally do, if I remember right, like I said, it's $43.5 million for the interior lanes of Hunt Highway to repave all that. So there's a lot of things that HERF needs to be spared for on the actual pavement and transportation projects. I did struggle, I will admit, to doing this PowerPoint because there were so many angles, and as an engineer, I want to spend all my time doing analysis. I want to use numbers. I don't want to speak about generalities. I love numbers. And I spent hours and hours on a spreadsheet that no one will ever see that proved problematic because it had too many variables. It was trying to figure out our growth and what happens with this and how all this affects that. And in the end, it was kind of funny speaking to Ben. He says, why don't you just focus that you're not able to do enough of what you have today, let alone if we do a decrease. And so what he means by that is there are communities, I'll pick on Mesa. I think Mesa has I don't know if it's a strategic plan, but they have a pavement index of, I believe, like 91 or 92. It's impossible. But if you look at the majority of Mesa, they do have very nice roads. And so how they achieve that is they're one of the few in the state that has a separate tax for maintaining the roads. They have a separate tax to that. So they have identified that we cannot maintain our roads with just HERF, and we are going to pass another ordinance, and by that our community has buy-in saying, yes, we want nice roads, and so it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy, and even with that, they can't maintain that number. It's almost impossible. The number essentially is almost like a road. It's almost 1.5 years to 2 years old, and you think about that, it's impossible. But they've taken a very aggressive approach on how that they are going to have very nice streets, but they've had to go on and get a secondary tax for that. So with that, any questions can be sent from the public or the council, if they are not to be asked tonight, to myself or Mr. Billingsley as it relates to transportation and like the long-term planning and again, the utilization of dollars. But again, I'd just like to open up with any questions that we may have.
Council, do you have any questions? Councilmember Wall.
I just have one, and it may have to do with my memory loss, I'm not sure. When a developer comes in and starts a new development or a section of a new development, the cost to install the street lights, is that cost incorporated into the bonding that is offered to pay for the infrastructure?
Yes, ma'am. As part of the, now keep in mind, we have two different kinds of development that goes on. One in a CFD, and then one not in a CFD. So if it were to occur in an area development, say, that isn't utilizing the CFD as an option, they would pay for those lights. The developer would up front as part of that. Now it's different when you're operating in a community facilities district. So in Anthem, for example, a packet is submitted, cooperatively bid, publicly, third-party review based on not only town staff, but our third-party reviewer for the CFDs, called a CFD engineer. And all of those improvements, the sidewalk, the streets, drainage improvements, et cetera, the street lights, those are all submitted as part of the package. So the SLID doesn't actually pay for the poles themselves. The SLID is for maintenance of that infrastructure as well as the light bills for those.
Okay, so in the new development that we're talking about, Mesquite Trails, are they going to have a CFD?
So, Mayor, Councilmember Wall, in all of the development agreements that the town has done historically, they've provided an option to all developers to establish the CFD as a tool in providing that development. To this point, I think Larry's gone, but to this point in all of Chris and I's meetings with Mesquite Trails, they haven't talked to us yet about forming a CFD, but they may.
So
I would like to point out a clarification though. The ability for them is $3,500 a lot in Anthem. How they reach that is sort of their business. They leave money on the table. They can't develop a lot for $3,500. So what they put in there, they choose to do whatever they have for the easiest of record keeping. So they don't have to necessarily use the street lights. And I guess the follow-up would be as a kind of a question to you. When you said bond, we're talking about the CFD. Okay.
Yes.
Specifically CFD
Yeah.
then.
So if Mesquite Trails doesn't have a CFD or doesn't request a CFD, they would have to pay for the installation, the purchase of the poles and the installation. And then the SLIDs would again only be covering, and they would have to recuperate the cost for that infrastructure through the cost of their homes.
Yes, ma'am, and we call that the typical development process that occurs most places. But yes, the developer would be responsible. I think it probably goes without saying that if that were the case and the developer was responsible for providing that lighting, there probably would be less lights and less density of light in those type of subdivisions. At least that's my experience.
Okay, in each scenario then, the SLID is only covering the cost of maintenance and
Yes, ma'am,
operation.
that's the intent of SLIDs.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to make one more note, because until such time as it's added to the tax roll, the developer continues to pay even for the cost of electricity.
I have one question too.
Go ahead, Councilmember Larson.
So I noticed on the first slide that you talked about how they, new developers have to develop the SLIDs before, right, can you go back to that first slide? I can't remember exactly how you worded it. I don't want to misspeak. Oh, maybe, was it the first one?
Whoa, I missed it. There it is.
Yeah, before the final plat is recorded. So I want to clarify that they don't have to form a SLID. They do. They do. Always and forever. So if the city decides that they don't want to do a CFD and they want to do less lights, we're still going to mandate that they have to form a SLID?
It's actually part of the town code. As it stands now, the town code requires formation of SLIDs for all new development.
Now, remind me again, I thought we had approved where downtown they could form a SLID, but we're not going to mandate them to form a SLID, correct?
Yes.
It's
proposed, but that hasn't been approved by council yet. You've just reviewed that. But we were asked by council to provide a code amendment to allow for SLIDs to be developed under certain protocols in existing areas, yes. But you guys haven't approved that yet. One step to getting to that was completing this discussion tonight.
I also want to add, there's a little bit of clarity lost in that. A new development in downtown, just because it is downtown, would still required to have a SLID. Mm-hmm. So if and when a final plat occurs, let's say adjacent to Sunrise Estates Phase 2 or Sunrise Estates Phase 1, when that develops residentially, that is, per the town code, going to require it. It's not, I want to separate the retroactive approach to new development. All new development is currently required to have a SLID. And if that would be a 60-lot custom quarter section, low density, cowboy-esque land development, that would be required. We have one development that we are aware of that doesn't require a SLID, and they were going to go dark sky. We've actually met with that developer and asked for, because we are looking at revamping his development agreement, I've asked him to include the SLID because it strictly prohibits us from the SLID today. I've asked them if he would not oppose having a SLID because we want consistency. Even if they're only going to have a few lights in that, we want consistency. That is one thing I think I've heard is fairness and equality, and so far so good. They have not opposed the idea of formation of a SLID if and when that comes. But that's the only one I'm aware of.
So the reason that developer doesn't have to do a SLID is because when that was approved by council, they had a separate contractual agreement, a development agreement, saying that it was going to be rural, dark sky, and not really have street lighting, and that they didn't have to have SLIDs.
Right. So just to clarify, that as the code stands now, or as it will stand in the future, it doesn't regulate the number or density of lights, or necessarily anything but the fact that it will only pay for the electricity and maintenance, and will not, so that those things are standard across the board, but it could vary what those SLIDs truly look like, just the fact that the underlying financial mechanism is there, just so I'm understanding.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think the key thing from that question for the public to understand is if it's a subdivision. So if, say, one of our local property owners had had a large piece of property, and it was going to have a minor land division, so it was going to be split into 3 parcels with custom homes. That's not a subdivision, so they wouldn't be required to have a SLID. But anything with 5 or more lots that complies with the subdivision code and builds a subdivision must have a SLID under the current ordinance, and current city code rather. And that SLID, all the SLIDs under state law would just cover electricity costs and maintenance, if that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Well, hold on. The idea, though, outside of this, we have engineering standards, and those engineering standards are minimum requirements. So to say that somebody wanted to relax and have something that wouldn't be as stringent, like, for example, instead of having 1 foot of freeboard, they could have 2 foot of freeboard. The town wouldn't enforce that because that is actually more conservative on the drainage side. But if they wanted to have 4 foot of water in the hole versus 3 foot, the town would not allow that. And why I bring that up is, so far, our minimum standards as it relates to street light, we have never looked at the idea of regulating development and saying, you can't provide more. And so if that's something that the council is going to be concerned with, I'm not aware of anybody sort of regulating and saying you can't provide more, because I've spoken to Anthem, the upper management, I've spoken to their engineer, and they all have had this idea of this fit the image that we wanted in this community. They openly admit it's a little bit overlit because that's the image that they wanted. So I don't know how the engineering staff right now would sit there and tell a developer, you can't put in more than 1 tennis court. You can't have this amount of street lights. You can't, if our local street width is X amount, I mean, there's just so many things in there that development communities, if they wanted to do something nicer, if someone wanted to create a boulevard, for example, and it met fire regulations and it met engineering regulations, we'd allow someone to build what, like you see in a $700,000-800,000 medium price home in Gilbert. We would allow a boulevard. It's not in our engineering standards naturally, because we don't require those. But we would have to discuss internally to figure out if we're going to sit there and say, now, not only is this a minimum requirement, this is absolutely a maximum requirement. You're starting to overstep the requirements as seen by another registrant, because that engineer seals that. He may feel, for whatever reason, just like a building official, he may feel like it needs an extra emergency exit. I don't care what the code says, Chris. I want an extra, because all these little girls, when ballet happens and if there's ever a fire, they're all in an uproar. I want an, this is a real life example, but this is the same kind of thing. If an engineer said, I really feel like I want more street lights, I feel like this is the necessity, that may be troubling from a registrant standpoint once they want to obviously seal that. So if that's sort of a direction that we want to look at, we will never have that level of parity against all subdivisions the way that our engineering standards are written today.
I don't want to confuse the issue, but I think it's important that I clarify this. With regard to the density of streetlights and the design standards in Anthem, those are tied to our development agreement and their plats and the design standards that were approved by the town. So we can't change the lighting standards in Anthem at this point.
I don't think anyone was asking that.
Agreed.
Just saying.
Thank you. I appreciate your thoroughness. Cleared a lot up.
Exactly. Councilmember Hughes, do you have any questions?
No.
All right. Thank you very much for that work session, Mr. Salas.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is our manager's report.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I must first apologize because I'm going to have a fairly lengthy report this evening. But as I go through it, you'll understand why it's a fairly lengthy report. I'm going to do my best, however, I can't see, so I'm going to be putting my glasses on and taking my glasses off as I go through this. The first thing that I wanted to mention for those out in TV land and anybody who may be attending this evening is that the Florence Police Department, subject to review, due to ongoing, some of the ongoing issues we're dealing with right now, is going to offer, and they actually are open to register online at this point, a Youth Citizens Police Academy for students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, and that would occur hopefully in the fall of 2020. Some of the topics to be discussed as part of that program: crime scene investigations, fingerprinting, dangerous drugs education, firearm safety, equipment demos, internet safety, alcohol abuse education, crime reporting, and team building, including getting to work with our K-9 officer. The intent is to have a one-week course from June 1st to the 5th, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. I don't know why I said fall, because it's summertime, but thank you, Chief, for bringing that forward, and hopefully we're able to do that. Does anybody have anything? No? Okay. Secondarily, it's with great pride that I inform the council and the public that our chief, Bruce Walls, was just elected last week to be the new president of PCLEA, our county law enforcement association. If we could give Chief a round of applause. Lastly, the town of Florence released 2 pieces of information, 2 separate media releases this afternoon. They are also posted on the town website as well as on our social media platforms with respect to the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. I think it's really important due to what's going on and the fluidity of the situation that seemed to change yesterday and all weekend on almost an hourly basis, that the town of Florence is taking those recent developments very seriously. We have very trained and experienced individuals that are employed by the town. We've been in constant communication with the state, county, and local medical professionals. A state of emergency, as everyone is aware, has been declared both federally and by the state of Arizona. And the Pinal County Department of Health has activated their incident command system. One of the things that we're tremendously proud of is our partner, that is Mountain Vista Medical Center, who's the operator of the Florence Anthem Hospital. We had 2 meetings last week, and they have been very supportive to make sure that they provide the best community support possible. I have, and the chiefs have, a meeting with Mountain Vista tomorrow to try and figure out how we further that coordination. But I do have some updates for the public from the town of Florence. First, the town is canceling all special events through the end of April. At this time, that will include Powwow, Eggstravaganza, Road to Country Thunder, and the Movie in the Park. The town has also reached out to the organizers of Country Thunder, Gallagher Softball Tournament, Third Fridays on Main, and the upcoming Rail 3 Ranch Rodeo to make them aware of yesterday's CDC recommendations to not hold gatherings of more than 50 people. Of course, as council knows, President Trump and other health officials came forward today with a recommendation, not a regulation, but a recommendation to keep gatherings, including in your own home, to less than 10 people. The town is also canceling recreation, active adult, and library programming through Monday, March 30th. That will essentially match the closures that are occurring from the Florence Unified School District. The town, due to the nature of activities performed at the fitness center as well as our customer base, we will be closing the fitness center tomorrow until further notice. The Give a Lift program, our 5310 grant program, is also suspended at this time. This program requires and relies on volunteers. Those volunteers are all in high-risk category according to the CDC. We're looking for other options, but that's something that, due to that volunteer requirement, is difficult for us to provide at this time. The medical equipment loan program will continue to be offered, but it's very important to know if you need to use the durable medical equipment, you need to call Community Services at 520-868-7040 to make sure that you arrange for all pickup and drop off of equipment. Due to the CDC guidelines and the nature of our programs, Florence will be closing the Florence Active Adult Center. We understand that the top priority for seniors is making sure that they have meals. We will continue the Meals on Wheels program, and we're working with staff. We had 2 meetings today, John. We're working with staff to make sure that we prepare meals and have them for pickup at the Active Adult Center, but we will not be hosting I can't come up with a word, meals at the Active Adult Center. Consistent with the Maricopa County Library District and many libraries in Pinal County, we just found out today, the Florence Library will be closing on Wednesday, March 18th until further notice. All room reservations at the Florence Community Center, as well as our facility rentals, are going to be suspended at this time. The town parks will remain open. Park restrooms will remain open and will receive cleaning and supply services as long as our resources allow. If you don't watch the news or listen to social media, you know that paper products especially, but also disinfectants are in very short supply, and that's not just for the public, but also for government entities. There are currently no plans to suspend the intercession and after-school programs that are offered by the town. Protocols are being put in place, and partnerships are being researched to make sure that we can meet the community need. That said, if further guidance comes down from the state government, federal government, or from the county, that program may be in jeopardy as well. The reason that is not being suspended at this time is because of the tremendous need that's being voiced to us from the community regarding the school closures until April, and lack of, how do you want to say, babysitting or child care options in Florence. Other things for citizens to be aware of, and this is very important from the fire department perspective. Citizens who aren't feeling well, are showing symptoms of the coronavirus, do not go to the town of Florence fire stations. We have no ability to test or treat at those fire stations, and we're doing our very best to make sure that those very important public responders are able to stay healthy so that we can continue providing those very important functions. As I mentioned before, fire stations are not equipped for testing or treatment. Our option or our request went out to Mountain Vista Medical Center to make sure that they put the protocols in place for diagnosis and testing at the Florence Anthem Hospital, and that is going to occur this week. Once again, thank you very much to Mountain Vista. An additional resource is the Standing Arizona Poison Control System, which I think everyone's familiar with. They are now the COVID-19 call center, and so folks that believe that they may have the virus, they're showing symptoms, they can call, the general public can now call 1-844-542-8201 and get assistance on the phone from medical providers with respect to the virus. The town of Florence has suspended all of our volunteer programs. The reason that we have suspended our volunteer programs is almost 100% of our volunteer base are folks that fall into the high-risk area under CDC requirements. That will impact the Florence Police Department, Florence Fire Department, as well as the Community Services Department. The municipal court is still going forward, and hearings and court is still scheduled, but that could change at any time based on decisions from the Arizona Supreme Court. It's important to point out that although no decision has been made at this time, the Florence Town Council has the ability to hold remote meetings through technologic means, and if that takes place, that may limit public involvement. When I say limit public involvement, we would no longer have public hearings like we had tonight, and we would not have a call to the public with respect to those agendas. Also effective immediately, all board, commission, committee, and task force meetings are canceled until further notice. The town of Florence is working closely with the Arizona Department of Health Services, Pinal County Department of Public Health, our regional public safety agencies, the Centers for Disease Control, and obviously our local health care providers in doing our best to make sure that information is disseminated on this virus and to protect yourself and your family. Additionally, town departments have an established protocol and are using the appropriate precautionary measures in providing services to our residents and businesses. Please go on the town website or on social media for additional tips on how to protect yourself and your family from the COVID-19 virus. That's all I had.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions for Manager Billingsley?
Yes. Do we have any reports from what businesses in town that may be closed or?
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, I do not have any information regarding businesses that may be closed at this time.
Thank you.
Our next item is our second call to the public. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak at this time? Closing call to the public. Call to the council for current events only. Councilmember Wall.
I just heard this afternoon that McDonald's will only have drive-through service effective immediately. And I have received an email from L&B Cantina, and they are more than willing to provide takeout service to anyone who desires it, but they will actually be open for business. So those are two businesses that I have information on.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Councilmember Larson.
I just want to say thank you for your response, and I believe it's important to inform our public about what we're doing and the actions that we're taking to curb this. So I really appreciate you putting all this together, as well as Mayor, you're putting together your public notice as well. So I think it's important that our citizens know that we care and that we're trying our best to protect them and to look out for their best interest.
Councilmember Cordes.
Well, I didn't buy into all of the craziness, so I attended the Caliente car show, and I dressed up as a clown, and I have witnesses that I dressed up like a clown. I had a blast. They had 75 cars show up, which was pretty good considering they are an at-risk community. So they did have 75 cars show up, but everybody did really well to make sure they didn't shake hands or do anything like that, and was constantly sanitizing and washing their hands. So it turned out to be a great event. And then I also attended the music festival, and attendance was low, but it still turned out to be a great event. And again, everybody was doing their best to make sure they were sanitized. There was water on site for us to wash our hands. I know some people said there was not going to be water, but there was water. So there was plenty of times you could wash your hands. There was lots of sanitizer around. Nobody stole the toilet paper, so that was really nice. So I enjoyed my weekend getting out and enjoying our community, and for those of us that showed up, I think the vendors and the promoters and the bands all appreciated it. And I want to send my condolences to Council Member Hawkins' family and friends. And that's it.
That car show was pretty impromptu, wasn't it?
No, is that impromptu?
Yeah.
It's their 7th annual car show.
See, and for some reason I missed that one.
Yeah, I was asked to attend, geez, months ago, probably 7 months ago.
I missed
that
there,
one. But it was fun. The chief was there, Lieutenant Tryon was there. We had a blast. I encourage everybody to attend that one next year because you will definitely enjoy it.
Show us out an invite because we didn't know about that.
Yeah, because I went to that one, but a couple weeks before that, I had went to the parade as well.
And that was the same day as the women's.
And so I think, I don't know. I don't know how I got invited, but I got invited.
All right, sounds like a plan. Vice Mayor Anderson.
This has been a sad week for me because Bill was such a good friend. That's all I can say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So, in our community right now, I know that a lot of people have been pulling together. I was also at the festival on Saturday and talked about the census, and you know, not a lot of people did show up at that point. They made a choice to either attend or not attend. There was distancing going on there. But I'm really proud of how our community is coming together and how we're helping. I want to remind people when you're in a grocery store, maybe not take everything. If you know that there's somebody, they're at home, maybe they can't go shopping, they need something, reach out, see what they need. If you have it, help them out with it. That's what's going to bring our community together over the next few weeks. I also have Councilmember Hughes on the phone, and I want to give her an opportunity because I didn't see her visually. I skipped over her. Councilmember Hughes, do you have anything that you'd like to say during call to the council?
Just that my heart is saddened by the passing of Bill. That's all.
Excellent. So with that, we have a lot of things that are going on this week. A lot of sadness that has happened as well. We are going to continue to inform the public and be transparent during this time. We do have a second executive session this evening. And with that, I need a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.